Welcome to Threads of Truth, the podcast where real-life mysteries meet internet speculation. Today we're examining a case that began as a heartbreaking beach disappearance, but slowly transformed into a story involving insurance money, conflicting statements, and a lie investigators could not ignore.
Yeah, it forces a complete reevaluation of every assumption we make when a tragedy strikes, you know? Like, we are so conditioned to view certain events through a very specific lens of empathy, especially when the ocean is involved.
Right, absolutely.
There is this collective, almost ancient respect for the sea. And the default assumption is always that the water takes things, washes away the evidence, and just hides the truth in its depths. But in this instance, the truth didn't stay submerged.
No.
It really didn't. It washed ashore, not as physical evidence, but through this meticulously constructed, yet totally fatally flawed digital paper trail.
It's wild. The timeline of this case is just incredibly erratic. I mean, the initial reports present as an absolute standard, albeit devastating local tragedy.
Yeah.
A family loses a father to the Atlantic currents. The helicopters deploy, the frantic 911 calls are logged, and, the immediate reaction from you, from me, from the public, is profound sympathy for the son who is left standing on the shore.
Completely natural reaction.
Right. Yet within just a matter of days, that somber search and rescue mission completely shatters. It turns into an incredibly complex web of fraud, cross-country fugitives, and eventually these bizarre public safety threats.
It really escalates so fast.
It does. So for you listening, we're going to walk through the events of July 2012 at Jones Beach. We'll unpack the life insurance angle that catalyzed the entire plot and figure out the exact mechanics of how a multi-agency missing person search pivots into a massive criminal investigation practically overnight.
And to understand the unraveling, we first really have to look at the illusion they constructed on the shores of New York. We are talking about the Roth family. The central figures here are 47-year-old Raymond Roth, the father, and his 22-year-old son, Jonathan.
Okay, so July 28, 2012, Jones Beach, Long Island. It is the peak of summer. The beaches are packed. But the Atlantic Ocean along the East Coast is notoriously unpredictable.
Oh, very much so.
The surf is rough, and the rip currents can be incredibly dangerous.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, a rip current is essentially a powerful, narrow channel of fast-moving water. It pulls swimmers away from the shore, and it happens very quickly.
Like almost instantly, right?
Exactly. Even strong swimmers can be swept out if they panic and try to fight the current rather than swimming parallel to the shore. It really only takes a moment of lost footing for someone to be pulled under.
And that is the precise picture painted on that July afternoon. Jonathan Roth makes a frantic 911 call. He tells the emergency dispatcher that his father, Raymond, walked into the rough Atlantic waters, went beneath the surface, and simply vanished.
Just gone.
Yeah. Now, while examining the massive stack of historical records, legal documents, and news summaries to prepare for this case, there is a very strange anomaly that has to be addressed. In some of the publicly available historical summaries floating around out there, the narrative is completely inverted.
Yes, I saw that too. There are actually records that claim Raymond was the one who reported Jonathan missing.
Which is crazy.
Right. These summaries describe the father standing on the beach, helplessly watching strong currents pull his 22-year-old son out to sea.
It is a massive contradiction.
Yeah.
But we have to be absolutely clear for everyone listening. That is not the reality of the events.
No, not at all.
The sworn testimony, the legal proceedings, the search efforts, and the subsequent arrests all definitively center on Raymond being the one who supposedly disappeared into the water, with Jonathan making the call.
Right, the legal framework is very clear on that.
But the fact that this flipped narrative exists at all online is fascinating. I mean, it changes the entire psychological profile of the crime if you think the father lost the son versus the son losing the father.
Oh, absolutely. It's a textbook example of how information degrades in the digital era. When a story breaks, the initial reports are just chaotic. A reporter might interview a bystander who misspeaks, saying, a father lost his son instead of a son lost his father.
Right, just a slip of the tongue.
Exactly. And in today's landscape, that initial misquote is picked up by news aggregators, scraped by automated summary tools, and suddenly a completely false parallel narrative is immortalized alongside the truth.
Which makes researching this stuff so confusing.
It really highlights how easily early misreporting can confuse the historical record. But, the authorities operating on that beach on July 28 were under no such illusions. They were looking for Raymond Roth.
And their response was massive. I mean, when a 911 call comes in for a drowning at a high-profile location like Jones Beach, the protocol isn't just to send a single patrol car.
No, not at all.
You have the Nassau County Police, the New York State Park Police, and the U.S. Coast Guard all converging simultaneously. They launched helicopters to scan the surface from the air, deployed specialized marine units, and had ground teams combing the shoreline.
And the logistics of a search operation like this are staggering. The Coast Guard doesn't just look at the water. They run complex drift pattern calculations.
Like mathematical models.
Yeah, exactly. They take into account the tidal currents, the wind speed, the water temperature, and even the specific buoyancy of a human body. They create a search grid based on models of where a body would realistically travel over a set period of hours.
Wow.
Yeah, they're calculating survival windows to determine whether they are executing a rescue operation or, unfortunately, a recovery mission.
Which means they're burning through tens of thousands of taxpayer dollars. Aviation fuel is incredibly expensive. Marine units require massive resources. And they are pulling emergency personnel away from other potential crises across the coast.
All operating under the tragic presumption that they were trying to bring a body home to a grieving family.
Right. But the reality of the situation completely mocks that effort. Because while those helicopters were scanning the choppy water and divers were preparing to search the depths, Raymond Roth was entirely dry.
He was fine.
He had not drowned. The investigators eventually pieced together that Raymond simply waded into the water, walked back out further down the beach, totally out of sight of the main crowds, got into his vehicle, and started driving south.
Just got in his car and left. And the compartmentalization required to execute that escape is chilling.
It really is.
You have to tune out the reality of what you are leaving behind. You have to mentally block out the fact that your son is standing on a beach, actively lying to police officers and performing a traumatic breakdown for the public.
Just putting on a show.
Yeah. To do that, you have to be completely consumed by the primary objective, which in this case was the motive.
And the motive was at least $410,000 in life insurance policies. The plot was a coordinated effort. The father and son agreed to fake the drowning, wait out the legal requirements, have Jonathan file the insurance claim, cash out the policies, and allow Raymond to start a financially secure, untraceable life in Florida.
But see, going untraceable in the modern world is an incredible feat of operational security. It's something very few amateur criminals actually possess.
Right, because everything is tracked now.
Exactly. You are attempting to erase a human being from the administrative state. You can't use bank accounts. You can't use credit cards. You can't register a vehicle. And you certainly can't use your own identity.
Which requires discipline.
Yes, a level of discipline that Raymond Roth fundamentally lacked.
Because the illusion fractured in a matter of days. And it wasn't dismantled by brilliant forensic accounting or some sudden confession from Jonathan under the pressure of police interrogation.
No, it was so much simpler than that.
It was dismantled by the family's own computer. On August 1st, just days after the disappearance, Raymond's wife, Ivana Roth, logged onto a computer at home and found a series of emails.
And these were not vague coded messages, by the way.
No, not at all.
These were explicit step-by-step emails between Raymond and Jonathan. They outlined the timeline of the fake drowning, the logistics of the escape, and the specific plan for the insurance payout.
It's unbelievable.
They documented their own criminal conspiracy on a shared home network.
So even immediately secures those emails and turns them over to the authorities. The investigative pivot here is incredible. The police go from searching the ocean floor for a victim to launching a nationwide manhunt for a fraudster.
A total 180.
Yeah, but they didn't even have to hunt for long because the very next day, August 2, Raymond's grand escape falls apart in South Carolina. He's pulled over by a state trooper for speeding.
Which is it brings us to a fascinating paradox in how amateur criminals operate. The case files note that before faking his death, Raymond meticulously removed his driver's license from his wallet. The logic is actually sound. If his wallet is found on the beach, or if a body is somehow recovered, the lack of identification complicates the process for the authorities. So he took the license with him to use at his Florida timeshare.
Right, so he has it on him. It's like a bank robber carefully disabling the security cameras, slipping past the silent alarms, stealing all the cash, and then leaving their own wallet on the counter.
Exactly.
He goes through this extreme calculation to fake his own death, but then recklessly speeds on an interstate and hands the driver's license of a dead man to a state trooper.
Yeah.
I mean, how does someone capable of planning a multi-agency deception make a mistake that incredibly basic?
It really comes down to cognitive load and the psychology of task saturation. When someone plans a complex deception, their prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain responsible for planning and decision-making, is entirely consumed by the active mission.
Which was the beach.
Right. For Raymond, the mission was the choreography at Jones Beach. The timing of the 911 call, the specific route to his car, avoiding witnesses. He successfully executed that primary objective.
He finished the performance.
He did. And once he was in the car driving south, his brain registered the mission as complete. The adrenaline crashed. He experienced a profound but completely false sense of security.
Wow. So the speeding ticket wasn't just a slip-up.
No, the speeding ticket isn't just a mistake. It's a symptom of arrogance and decompression. He stopped acting like a fugitive trying to evade a nationwide dragnet and started acting like a middle-aged guy on a road trip to his timeshare.
Just totally relaxed.
Yeah. He completely forgot the fundamental rule of faking your death. The performance never ends. Handing his license to the trooper was an automatic muscle memory response to authority. His brain defaulted to routine behavior, completely overriding the logical reality that the identity on that card was supposed to be at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean.
The cognitive dissonance there is staggering. He is simultaneously the criminal mastermind and the guy annoyed he got caught going a little too fast. So the game is up. He is identified. He eventually returns to New York and he surrenders. And you would assume the story concludes there. The fraud is thwarted, the resources are tallied, and he faces the legal consequences. But on March 21st, 2013, we get what I can only describe as a bizarre, terrifying encore.
Yeah, this is the moment the narrative shifts from a clumsy, nonviolent, white-collar fraud into a genuine public safety hazard. It really forces us to completely reevaluate the psychological profile we might have assigned to Raymond Roth.
So Raymond is in a Nassau County courtroom on March 21st. He accepts a plea deal for the insurance hoax. And the terms of this deal are shockingly lenient.
Extremely.
For orchestrating a massive fraud, wasting tens of thousands of taxpayer dollars, and faking his own death. He is offered 90 days in jail and 5 years of probation. He essentially won the lottery of the criminal justice system.
A 90-day sentence for a crime with that level of premeditation and public cost is extraordinarily light.
It's unheard of.
The logical response for anyone facing years in state prison who is suddenly offered 90 days in a county facility is absolute compliance. You walk out of that courthouse, you lock yourself in your house, and you do absolutely nothing to jeopardize the agreement.
But Raymond Roth does the exact opposite. Hours, literally hours after walking out of that courthouse with his lenient plea deal, he drives to Freeport, New York. He pulls his van up to a woman on the street, claims to be a police officer, threatens her with immediate arrest, and orders her to get into his vehicle.
The escalation there from a crime of avoidance, like running away to Florida, to a crime of confrontation and predation is just breathtaking.
The woman realizes something is terribly wrong, refuses to get into the van, and runs into a nearby check cashing business to get away from him.
Thank goodness.
But Raymond doesn't panic and drive off. He pursues her inside the business. He starts aggressively demanding that the employees open the locked security doors so he can get to her, still operating under the delusion that he has the authority of law enforcement.
We really have to analyze the sheer entitlement required to attempt an abduction hours after receiving judicial mercy.
Right. Why would he do that?
Well, the defense later claimed that Raymond was under the influence of a combination of bipolar medication and alcohol. And while substance abuse and psychiatric crises can certainly cause erratic and destructive behavior, impersonating a police officer to order a woman into a van requires a specific type of targeted predatory ideation.
Yeah, if the initial goal was strictly financial survival, risking it all hours after a plea deal makes zero sense. It's like surviving a Category 5 hurricane by hiding in your basement, and the minute the wind stops, you climb onto your roof to fly a kite in a thunderstorm.
That's a perfect way to put it.
He was arrested days later for this incident, completely obliterating his 90-day plea deal. Because, a judge is not going to uphold a lenient agreement when you commit an attempted kidnapping on the same day it was offered.
Definitely not.
But before we get to the final sentencing for the father, we have to look at the son. Because Jonathan's legal trajectory is just as chaotic.
Oh, yeah. Initially, Jonathan's legal strategy appeared to be full cooperation. The narrative constructed by his defense was that he was heavily influenced, perhaps even coerced, by a domineering father.
Which a lot of people believed at first.
Exactly. Because he provided the authorities with the necessary information to build the fraud case against Raymond, Jonathan was anticipating a sentence with no jail time.
Another golden ticket from the legal system.
Yep.
But Jonathan, much like his father, proved entirely incapable of simply accepting the win. Instead of showing up for his sentencing to finalize his zero jail time deal, Jonathan jumps bail. He goes on the run, completely abandoning his plea agreement.
Which creates a secondary crisis for the authorities. They are no longer just prosecuting a father who faked his death and impersonated an officer. They now have to allocate resources to track down a fugitive son who has blown his cooperation agreement.
Right. So he flees to Ohio, and he is eventually tracked down and captured, not by federal marshals, but by a bail bonds company.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Michelle Eskenazi of Empire Bail Bonds handled the capture, and she mentioned to the press that they had to use a certain amount of trickery to catch him, noting he was shocked when they finally cornered him.
Well, when bail enforcement agents use the term trickery, they're usually referring to skip tracing combined with social engineering or pretexting.
Like what?
Like, they might call a known associate pretending to be a sweepstakes company verifying an address, or they might set up a fake delivery to confirm someone is residing at a specific location. The fact that Jonathan was shocked by his capture points to the same profound naivety his father exhibited.
Just totally out of his depth.
Yeah, there's a complete lack of understanding of how surveillance, digital footprints, and investigative persistence actually function in the real world.
And the optics of his return to court are devastating. He appears in Nassau County Court wearing an orange jail jumpsuit, in handcuffs, and he tells reporters, "I never tried to run."
Oh, come on.
He claims he simply lacked the financial means to purchase a ticket back to New York for his court date.
Right. That statement is a classic minimization technique. He is attempting to reframe a deliberate evasion of the justice system as a mere logistical or financial hardship. However, the court documents reveal a much more complicated reality.
Always do.
It wasn't just a matter of missing a flight. He had several pending warrants for unrelated harassment charges involving a girlfriend.
Oh, wow. So he wasn't just hiding from the final steps of the insurance fraud case. He was hiding from a completely separate set of legal consequences stemming from his personal life.
Exactly.
It completely shatters the carefully constructed illusion of the innocent, coerced son.
The harassment warrants establish a pattern of destructive behavior that exists independently of his father's influence. He can no longer be viewed simply as a pawn in Raymond's overarching scheme. He is an individual making his own series of calculated, evasive choices.
Which all culminates in April 2014, the final legal reckoning. Yeah. Raymond, having destroyed his plea deal with the Freeport incident, is sentenced to 2 1/3 to 7 years in prison. The judge also orders him to pay over $36,000 in restitution to the Coast Guard and the Nassau County Police.
To cover the financial drain of that massive search effort he initiated.
Exactly. And Jonathan, having forfeited his no-jail deal by fleeing to Ohio, is sentenced to 1 year in jail. The consequences finally crystallize. But the aftermath of this legal saga is incredibly strange.
It really is.
At Raymond's sentencing, he explicitly tells the judge, "My son is disgusted with me." You assume the family is permanently, irrevocably fractured. Yet, Raymond's attorney later notes that while they were both incarcerated, they actually began to reconcile.
Wait, really?
Yeah, they started meeting at prison church groups and communicating as father and son again.
That reconciliation is a fascinating psychological footnote to the entire ordeal.
But it's incredibly difficult to process. I mean, they betrayed each other on multiple levels. The father dragged the son into a felony. The son provided evidence against the father spiraled into violent behavior. The son ran away. And then they sit down together in a prison cafeteria.
It's surreal.
It's less like a family making amends and more like two mutineers who sank their own ship. realizing they are the only two people stuck on the lifeboat. Does a reconciliation in that environment stem from genuine forgiveness? Or is it simply because they are the only two people on the planet who truly understand the magnitude of the lie they lived?
It is almost certainly the latter, compounded heavily by the extreme isolation of the prison environment. In the outside world, Jonathan had the physical and psychological space to distance himself, to attempt to build a new identity away from the trauma of his father's actions.
Right, he could just walk away.
But inside a correctional facility, your social world shrinks to a highly regimented, localized population. They share a unique, albeit highly toxic, context. No one else in that facility understands the specific adrenaline, the unique fear, and the profound public embarrassment of the Jones Beach illusion and its subsequent collapse.
They are trauma bonded by their own crimes.
Exactly. Forgiveness in that specific context might have very little to do with moral absolution. It is more likely a desperate need for a shared reality. They serve as mirrors for each other's spectacular failure.
Wow.
Acknowledging each other in that church group might have been the only mechanism they had to process the reality of what they actually did to their lives.
And that transition from a tragic public event to a fractured family dynamic is exactly what caught the attention of the internet. When a case shifts this violently, the online communities naturally dissect every single contradiction. We need to explore how the public and online sleuths attempted to make sense of this chaos as the facts dripped out.
Yeah, the digital footprint of this case extends far beyond the emails Evan discovered. The true crime community, Reddit boards, and specialized online forums became these real-time analytical engines. And their primary focus initially was dissecting the motive.
The financial desperation theories definitely took center stage. The true crime boards heavily analyzed that $410,000 life insurance policy.
Oh, they obsessed over it.
The debate was intense. Was this pure, unadulterated greed, a sociopathic father casually funding a retirement in Florida? Or was this a symptom of crippling economic stress? Were they drowning in debt? And did that immense financial pressure push a family to the absolute brink of reason?
This is a foundational debate in almost every major fraud case. The public has a deep psychological need to understand the catalyst. If it is pure greed, the perpetrators can easily be categorized as monsters.
Right, nice and simple.
But if the catalyst is crippling debt, the public might uncomfortably find a sliver of dark empathy. People ask themselves what they might be capable of if they were about to lose their home or their livelihood.
Yeah, you put yourself in their shoes.
Exactly. So the forums poured over whatever financial records, property details, and employment histories were made public, trying to mathematically diagnose the exact level of desperation.
But the internet sleuths were also dealing with massive informational noise. Specifically, that flip script confusion we discussed earlier. Imagine trying to build a chronological timeline of the fraud, and suddenly you hit a massive piece of conflicting data claiming the father was actually the one who reported the son missing.
It throws everything off. When the online community encounters a discrepancy of that magnitude, the immediate reaction is rarely to assume a simple clerical error.
No, the internet loves a conspiracy.
They really do. The forums began questioning if the deliberate obfuscation was part of the family's master plan. Did Raymond and Jonathan intentionally seed false information to bystanders or the media to confuse the investigative timeline?
Which is an interesting theory.
It is. While we know it was likely just early chaotic misreporting that got aggregated by newsbots, the fact that the internet latched onto it demonstrates how deeply suspicious the public becomes when a narrative begins to crack.
Which feeds directly into the intense debate surrounding Jonathan's role. Early on, before the emails were discovered, Jonathan was universally viewed as the victim.
The poor grieving son.
Right, he was the grieving son, hyperventilated on the 911 call. But when the premeditation was revealed, the public skepticism hit him immediately. The forums debated his agency endlessly. Was a 22-year-old heavily coerced by a domineering, manipulative father, or was he a willing, greedy, equal conspirator who fully intended to walk away with half of that $400,000?
Public sympathy is a highly volatile resource. Initially, Jonathan possessed all of it. But as the investigative layers peeled back, that sympathy evaporated completely.
Oof, God.
And the turning point wasn't solely the discovery of the emails. It was his evasive behavior afterward. When he jumped bail, and when the details of the unrelated harassment warrant surfaced, the online narrative shifted permanently. He was no longer viewed as a victim of his father's machinations. He was categorized as an active, willing participant in his own downfall.
It's fascinating how quickly that flips. And, before the emails completely exposed the plot, the online communities were heavily focused on the no-body phenomenon. For those first few days, people were debating how investigators could ever definitively reconstruct the events without a physical body. How do you prove, beyond a reasonable doubt, that someone didn't just swim out too far and succumb to the current?
Well, the ocean is often viewed by the criminal mind as the ultimate accomplice.
That's eerie but true.
It is vast, it is powerful, and it provides an instant, seemingly unquestionable alibi. In a terrestrial disappearance, the absence of a body is highly suspicious and immediately triggers foul play investigations.
Because bodies don't just vanish on land.
Right. But with the ocean, the absence of a body is the statistically expected outcome of a drowning. It provides a natural cover story that is incredibly difficult for law enforcement to disprove scientifically in the short term.
But wait, if the ocean provides the perfect alibi because the body is presumed lost, the insurance company still isn't just going to hand over a check on day 2, are they?
Not at all. And this is where amateur fraudsters fundamentally misunderstand the mechanics of life insurance. In most jurisdictions, a missing person without a body takes 7 years to be declared legally dead in absentia.
7 years.
7 years. Now, there are peril-specific exceptions, like if a person is definitively seen entering a highly hazardous environment, like a plane crash or deep ocean currents, a judge might expedite that declaration of death.
Okay, so it could be faster.
It could be.
Yeah.
But an insurance company is going to conduct an aggressive, exhaustive audit before paying out a policy of that size. If Evana hadn't found those emails, proving Raymond didn't drown would have relied entirely on those financial audits and circumstantial evidence, which take months or years to compile.
So the ocean was the perfect alibi, but his own Wi-Fi router was his immediate downfall. Looking back at the internet theories, specifically the idea that financial desperation was the sole driver of this crime, there is a massive flaw in that logic. If this entire elaborate plot was strictly about clearing debt and surviving financially, the Freeport incident completely shatters that theory.
Oh, the behavior in Freeport contradicts everything about a financially motivated crime.
Exactly. Financial desperation might explain the mechanics of the insurance fraud, but it absolutely does not explain impersonating an officer and trying to abduct a stranger in a check-cashing store. The true crime forums focus so heavily on the math, on the $410,000, that they seem to miss the profound psychological volatility of the perpetrators.
Because people naturally prefer rational motives. We want to believe that human behavior, even criminal behavior, follows a logical equation. Extreme debt plus a high-value insurance policy equals fraud.
It makes it easier to digest.
It does, and the Jones Beach incident fits that equation perfectly. The online community focused on the money because money is quantifiable. You can debate a spreadsheet. You can't easily debate the sudden, terrifying urge to impersonate a police officer.
No, you really can't.
By focusing strictly on the financial desperation theory, the public was attempting to rationalize behavior that was, at its core, deeply irrational and dangerous. The financial motive was likely just the inciting incident for a much larger, pre-existing psychological unraveling.
When we examine that psychology of deception, Raymond Roth's behavior demonstrates a catastrophic containment failure. He successfully compartmentalized the fraud on the beach, but the shift from a white-collar fraudster to a violent public safety threat is deeply unsettling.
It is. The defense utilized the explanation of medication and alcohol cocktail, but while substances absolutely lower inhibitions, they rarely invent entirely new pathologies out of thin air.
Right, they just reveal what's there.
They strip away the containment and reveal what is already under the surface. The sheer audacity required to orchestrate a fake death on a public beach, wasting massive public resources, and the entitlement required to pull a woman off the street claiming you have the authority of the state. Both stem from the exact same psychological root.
Which is?
It is a fundamental, deeply entrenched belief that the rules of society simply do not apply to you. It is the belief that you can manipulate reality and the people within it to suit your immediate impulses.
It is the ultimate expression of narcissism. The Freeport incident wasn't an anomaly. It was the inevitable conclusion of the entitlement that started on the sand at Jones Beach. We also have to look at how these financial motives shape the actual mechanics of law enforcement investigations.
Yeah, when a family is grieving, the initial posture of the police is to act as a support system. They're there to manage the trauma and execute the search. But the moment investigators uncover massive, recently acquired, or heavily scrutinized life insurance policies, the entire dynamic of the investigation inverts instantly.
It becomes an adversarial process.
It acts as an immediate, blinding red flag. The narrative shifts from empathy for a grieving family to intense, aggressive scrutiny of their financial records and interpersonal communications.
That can make sense.
Investigators are trained to evaluate the push and the pull factors. The ocean is a natural hazard, but a $400,000 payout is a massive pull factor for deception. Once that financial incentive is discovered, every tear shed on the beach, every stammer on the 911 call, and every public plea is reevaluated by detectives, not as genuine trauma, but as a calculated performance.
Which mirrors exactly how the public perception evolved. This case is a study in how easily human sympathy can be weaponized. Imagine seeing the initial news reports. A son watching his father disappear into the waves.
Heartbreaking.
We're biologically hardwired to respond to that kind of distress. The public initially sent prayers. They felt the visceral pain of a young man who lost his father, only to realize days later that the grieving son was simply waiting for the requisite legal time to pass so he could collect a payout while the father was relaxing in Florida.
And when people realize their empathy has been manipulated for financial gain, their grief transforms into a very specific, very sharp anger. They recognize that the perpetrators didn't just attempt to steal from a faceless insurance conglomerate, they stole the community's emotional bandwidth.
That's a great way to frame it.
That is why the public reaction to Jonathan, and particularly to Raymond, became so intensely negative. They made fools of everyone who cared enough to worry about them.
Through all that anger, the prison sentences and the shattered lives, the tragedy wasn't the drowning. The tragedy was the lie itself and the collateral damage it caused to everyone involved.
It is a stark reminder that when you construct a lie of that magnitude, it eventually becomes the only reality you have left. The physical prison cells they occupied were just the final manifestation of the prison of deception they built long before they ever stepped foot on that beach.
Ultimately, the Jones Beach deception is a masterclass in how quickly the facade of a tragedy can crack when placed under the weight of financial greed and a digital footprint. You might believe you've planned the perfect escape. You might think the power of the ocean will hide your secrets indefinitely, but you forget the mechanics of the modern world.
You always forget something.
You forget that you hit send on an email, or you forget that handing your driver's license to a trooper breaks the illusion entirely.
The layers of surveillance, both digital and physical, are simply too dense now. The analog plan of walking into the water cannot survive the digital reality of our connected lives.
So for everyone listening, we want to leave you with a lingering, slightly unsettling question regarding the sheer luck involved in stopping this fraud. Think about Raymond Roth. Think about her logging onto that specific computer on August 1st.
Right.
If she had never found those step-by-step emails, if she hadn't immediately turned them over to the police, would Raymond have actually gotten away with the initial phase of the plan?
It's a scary thought.
The insurance company would have sought the payout, certainly. But would the police have known to look for a fugitive? Or, given what we saw in Freeport, the impersonation, the aggression, the complete lack of impulse control, was his psychological state so incredibly volatile that he was always destined to orchestrate his own capture, regardless of the emails?
He was his own worst enemy.
Exactly. It forces you to wonder how many seemingly accidental disappearances out there are just successful versions of this exact scheme, executed by individuals who simply had slightly better internet security and the discipline to stay hidden. Next time, we examine the disappearance of Timothy Pitson, a missing child case involving a mysterious note claiming he was safe but hidden from everyone who loved him.